Rob, my hand went up first.
I would just like to point out that James has some really interesting things to say.
Always more interesting. This is an ongoing discussion we've had since, I don't know, about 2005. I think Rob's...
Mostly I've listened.
Right. No, but anyway, so one of the things that I noticed that there are references to students' mathematical dispositions throughout this. Awesome. And one of the things I noticed here at TCNJ is that we do a lot of assessing of professional dispositions, but not content-specific dispositions, and those are not the same. And so it's interesting that this is something that is very prominent, and fortunately, there is some research that identifies issues related to that in terms of teaching and learning. Shameless plug alert, there will be a presentation this afternoon about this very topic. So it's just interesting that it's overlooked. But it's definitely something that is critical to understanding how students develop a relationship with mathematics and how they in turn attend to different issues in mathematics and think about things differently based on their kind of dispositional profile, if you will. And with all of this reference, one of the things I thought that was really interesting is under C3, C3.3, anticipating and attending to students' mathematical dispositions is so important, but I think I can only speak for myself, but I'm fairly sure that no one in any of our math methods or content classes actually does that, but I do. Try and talk about it because it's something that can be crippling to children. If you're not thinking about dispositions and thinking about how their emotional and cognitive and all of their motivational things are underscored by their dispositional issues. I think that's nifty that it's documented and attended to in some regard, but not necessarily highlighted enough.
And then a compulsive rule follower in me sees this and says to myself, oh, crap, this probably means I should be measuring kids' progress on this, right, as they're moving through my program. Like, not in addition to paying attention to it and making sure it's elevated, like, I should track whether I'm moving the needle on this. That's a whole new realm for me to think about. Rob, what's on your mind?
I was just waiting to hear what James had to say. I'm very happy. I think one way to look at this is where's the highest leverage and where do we get our biggest bang for the buck, which did not seem to come up. And so living in a world of scarce resources, one of the things I think about is, one of the things that I'm struck with when I see these standards is it's overwhelming. There's no way I can do all of these things. Where do I put my very few eggs in my very tiny basket? And so with that being said, I think that the opportunities to learn in clinical, that regardless of all the work that I do, my pre-service teachers do most of their learning about teaching when they do their student teaching.
Yeah.
And it's the thing over which I have the least control. It's the thing that's most divorced from what they do in my classroom. And it's a big black box over which I exert no control. And there are little or no incentives professionally for me to actually engage with that. So we work to make our methods courses a little bit better, and we don't really do anything to make their clinical experience better. And somebody gives us a huge evaluation sheet to use, and then we change it every couple of years. So I think figuring out how we can align the clinical experience feels to me sort of the biggest, the lowest hanging fruit. And so, one of the gifts of tenure is that I can go for whatever damn fruit I want. As long as I don't commit any felonies. So,
no fruit stealing around.
Just some light treason, sorry.
So anyway, I think that this question of where's our biggest bang for buck is a way for me to make it feel more like I can't do it all. I'm not even close.
I think that's a really important piece of it. And one thing that I think these standards have helped me think about is how to organize and rally and focus my efforts. Because we're all making changes to our programs year to year. We're tweaking this, refining that, trying to strengthen this piece. And I think we've all been doing that thoughtfully and intentionally. The standards give me some language and some rallying points around that, right? I can say kind of what Rob was saying, this is an issue in my program, and it is literally an issue in my program. I'm gonna focus here this year. I'm gonna try to figure out some ways to strengthen this piece, and maybe next semester, I move on to one of the other standards and say I'm gonna focus some more of my energy here. And gives me a landscape of the space to move around a little bit. I'm cognizant of time, and actually I'll put in a pitch for what Heather and Kathy are going to talk about. Actually might illuminate some aspects of P4 in interesting ways. But I want to just close with a few calls to action, ways that I think we can use these standards to help move the needle. You're not going to be able to do all these, and that's okay. But I think collectively, these are some areas I want us to think about. How do we advocate and draw connections between the AMTE standards and our teacher preparation standards, locally within our programs, more broadly at the state level? How do the elaborations give us some support for poking at particular issues that we may want to move the needle on in the state? So the praxis core idea I know is really salient for a lot of you. There's some ideas, the elaborations that I think would provide some creative thinking about that. Making effective math teaching visible across a range of candidates' experiences. So black boxing the field I think is really interesting. I had some conversations about the dispositions issue. If you look at C1.3, it talks about exhibiting productive mathematical dispositions in the context of content courses. So how do we illuminate what that practice looks like and get more of our colleagues who are teaching some of those content courses, either for our teachers inclusively or for a broader population, to see the work that we do? I want to think a little bit about our colleagues and our partners in districts. I think if we want these sorts of practices that we're advocating for, that the standards talk about, to be reflected in the field context with our mentor teachers, we have to make connections between the work that we're doing here at the university and the daily work and the artifacts of teaching. If the teachers that our student teachers are in their classrooms can't see our goals reflected in the daily work that they do, we know what's going to win. The daily work they do with kids is going to win. So how do we draw those parallels between the work they do every day of planning lessons, teaching those lessons, reflecting on those, assessing kids' thinking, and our broader goals in how we want our future math teachers to develop? Pressing teachers to identify tangible evidence of their use of effective research-based practices and saying, talk about them, elevate them. That work is invisible even for some of our most experienced mentor teachers. We don't support them in talking about that perhaps in the way that we should. And then attending to some of these programmatic aspects and underlying assumptions that support effective mathematics teaching. So really looking systemically about what we need to change and where we need to move the needle. So just a very small achievable chunks I'm giving you all to look at and think about. But these are the sorts of areas that I think we could really put some interesting work in that would change the game for our teacher candidates. So that's all I've got. I appreciate you talking and thinking and engaging. It's always interesting to hear how people are making sense of the standards, how people are thinking about these broader, more complex issues in math teacher education. And I look forward to hearing the rest of our presentations for the rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you. Here's a lot to take that.